Please welcome to the stage SCORE founder and chairman, Senator Bill Frist.
All right, welcome everybody. What a day, what a day. It's kind of neat being able to walk into a room, being able to visit with some old friends and see so many new friends who've come from around the country, and what will be this collection, this amalgam, this sort of coming together around a topic that's on the top of all our minds. And we all know we're going to leave today a little bit smarter, a whole lot smarter than when we came to the room. So I love that. I also like the fast pace, the way things are organized. SCORE has done such a great job over the years in organizing things in a way that are digestible, but also really useful immediately and in the midterm and in the long term. And we've been doing it now for almost 2 decades. And again, today I'm really, really excited about. This is our first AI symposium bringing everybody together. Although internally and working with many of you, we've been on the issue of AI in education for the last year and a half, really the last 2 years, but the last year and a half. But this is our first AI symposium. And it's fitting that our first event around this topic will begin with this whole subject of something really fond to my heart, but really important in this time of change, and that is leadership. One thing I've come to realize over the years is that leadership is it's always important, and we all know it, but it's most important in this time of change, of evolution, of uncertainty of what's coming quite next. And that's when leadership really does stand above. It's necessary, not sufficient, but necessary. And that's why we lead with that today, these moments of change. But not when the path is clear, and not when the answers out there, are coming quickly or are sort of obvious and you can grab them. But when these opportunities, fast coming, revolutionary, really do bring opportunities for new questions, new responses to be shaped in large part by that leadership. And I believe that's the why behind all of us coming together this morning and this afternoon. Artificial intelligence in every field of our lives is advancing just quicker. I've seen a lot of change because of my age over the years, and seeing the internet and actually explode in terms of commodity and commercialization, but nothing is changing quite as fast as this. Understandably, it has captured our attention, especially as we look at our objectives. But as I think about it, today's symposium isn't really about keeping pace and up with that pace and with that change in technology. It's a variation of that. It's all about leadership keeping pace with our responsibility coming back to the individual students and to that classroom. How does leadership keep up with that? It's been almost 2 decades now that SCORE has brought people together around some type of the most important questions and different types of questions facing education and our state. And every one of those conversations has been guided by the same belief. And it's a simple belief, but it's this sort of coalescing belief. And that is, when Tennessee's educators and policymakers and researchers and business leaders and parents come together around a shared purpose, it's the students who benefit. And that's what we see again and again, and that's what today is all about. There is no group better positioned than the people right here in this room as we met outside, as we renew friendships and we meet new people and who can be presenting today, people who've come in. There is no better group than people right now in this room looking around with this beautiful backdrop behind me that come together to be able to shape how AI serves Tennessee students. No better room, and today is just beginning. Time and time, our state has faced moments that asked us to think in different ways, that have challenged old assumptions and imagine a better plan forward for students. And we don't pretend that change isn't happening. We don't chase every single new idea simply because it's new. And we don't believe a single individual or a single organization has all the answers. No, rather, instead, we come together to ask thoughtful questions. We learn from each other. And together we work towards solutions that create better opportunities, again, coming back again and again to the students. That's the spirit that has defined Tennessee's education journey for so many years. And it positions us well for the conversation we're having today. The true promise of AI isn't found in the technology itself. It's taken a while for a lot of people to realize. People looked at the technology and said that is where the promise is. But no, now that we've learned about it over the last 2 years, we know it's found in how educators will be using that technology in order to personalize, to bring it at an intimate level, that use and that learning, and how school districts and the leaders of those district leaders use it to strengthen, to embolden, strengthen, and imagine or maybe reimagine how students use it to deepen their understanding, and how all of us use it to expand opportunity way beyond what we thought even 3 or 4 years ago. Technology on its own, again, this is something we increasingly realize because you want to grasp for anything that's going to help focus on the students, but technology on its own doesn't transform education for students. It's the people. People do. It's the choices that we make and we will make that's going to make the difference in determining whether it helps us fulfill the mission we've always shared, a simple, simple, simple mission, and that is preparing every Tennessee student for success. And that's the goal, that's the mission, that's the underlying current that brings us together. We're already seeing an increase in AI skills listed today in job postings. We see it. We see wage premiums for candidates with AI knowledge. They're growing dramatically just in the last year, last 18 months. Jobs are changing, as are the skills that students need to build to be successful in that workplace of the future. The workplace itself changing radically. Preparing students for that changing future is fundamental work. It's important work. It's work that spans industries, all sectors, and many pathways available to students in K-12 today. I think about it in medicine and health and healing, where I spend so much of my time and over the course of my life. It's an evolution, but it's really in many ways a revolution. In my office, I had a medical student who's now gone into his internship, and he was recounting with me that just a year and a half ago, when a patient came into the room with a problem, that he would sit down and immediately go to his computer and start typing and going through checklists and asking questions. When that patient came in with a problem, a physical, a spiritual, a mental health problem, with head down, with typing mechanically on a device, no sense of intimacy, no sense of really understanding that I care, no sense of empathy itself. But now, 12 months later, he comes in and yes, with an Android or an iPhone, and he says, if it's okay with you, I'm going to be using AI to capture our conversation so that I can focus on you. And there are a number of companies, Ambience is one, and Epic has one. The recorder goes down, and for the next 45 minutes, the focus is on the patient, on listening to the patient, that intimacy, as I describe it, that compassion. And that really has an impact on outcome and how well those patients do. And that's just one example of many, many in that particular field. And today we'll be talking about the opportunities very similarly to transform, to improve, and to better that interaction between people in the field of education. The theme of our today's symposium, keeping students at the center. And to me, that isn't simply the title of today's event, it's the principle that will guide every decision we make. I think over the course of the day, we'll be exploring new ideas, we'll be exploring new technologies, new possibilities, but our measure of success will always remain the same. Are students really learning? And that work never really does belong to other people. It brings us back to the students themselves. Are educators better equipped to help them succeed, those students? Are we opening up and are we expanding opportunities that prepare young people for lives of purpose, of contribution, of economic independence, of fulfillment? If the answer is yes, then we're moving in the right direction. And of course, if the answer is no, we have a lot more work to do. Keeping the students at the center means remembering that innovation is never the destination. That innovation is never the end point. Student success is. And when we stay anchored to that purpose, we can embrace new possibilities with both confidence, with a sense of charisma and an old Greek sense coming in, and of responsibility. So as I close, that's really what I hope today represents. It's what it's designed to do. You come into these meetings, you walk into the room, you don't know really what to expect, but the magic is about to unfold with wonderful presentations and our panels today. We're not going to simply have a conversation about AI, but a conversation about how we continue to prepare students for a future that is changing rapidly right before our eyes. Throughout the day, you're going to hear a bunch of different perspectives, and that's the beauty of it in a short period of time, gathering these different perspectives, national, local. You'll hear practical examples. You'll hear lessons learned, always useful, so we don't have to go back and relearn those lessons, and a bunch of new ideas that we haven't thought of, both from right here in our own state and indeed what's happening across the country. My hope is that you'll listen with curiosity, that you'll ask and engage with thoughtful questions, that you'll learn from one another, which is what it's all about, and that we leave with a new, or I would say a renewed sense of what's possible for Tennessee students. Our responsibility has never been to predict the future, it's to prepare students for it. And that work has never belonged to one person or one conversation or one organization or one sector. It belongs to all of us right now in this room. If we continue putting students first, I have every confidence that Tennessee will meet this moment with the same wisdom and purpose that has always defined our very best work. Thank each and every one of you. I know a lot of you got up early, came from other cities and other states. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your continued commitment to Tennessee's students. Thank you. Now it is my pleasure to welcome SCORE President and CEO David Mansouri, who will guide our opening panel. David, round of applause as they come forward.
All right, good morning. Great to be with all of you today. Thank you again for spending your morning with us. And as Senator Frist mentioned, we have, I think, a unique set of leaders in the room with us today. You all in this room represent leaders, you represent innovators, you represent individuals who are at the front lines of exploring the ways in which artificial intelligence can and should support teaching and learning. And we are at, this is obvious, but we are at an extraordinary time having this conversation. We each in this room we are sitting in a front row seat to a transformative technology that is unprecedented. We are experiencing that. We are exploring that technology each and every day. And so the questions that we are asking at SCORE, and that I know many of you in this room are asking, is what does that mean? What does that transformation mean? what does that sort of extraordinary moment mean for education? At SCORE, we are thinking about that in three ways. What does that mean for teaching and learning? What does that mean for the way we think about education systems? And what does that mean in preparing students for a successful career and economic independence? And the frame that we're trying to approach this conversation with at SCORE is, how could artificial intelligence be used as an accelerant in supporting students and education in each of those areas? What do we want it to do? What ways do we want it to serve and support student success? And what do we not want it to do? How do we not want it to engage with students and teachers? What guardrails need to exist as we think about this once-in-a-lifetime moment and new technology? And I feel a sense of responsibility in having this conversation today, because the folks in this room are going to answer those questions for our state, and many of the folks in this room are going to answer those questions for our country. And so I thank you for your time today, and excited to explore those questions with our opening panel. And so we've brought together 4 leaders from across the country who bring distinct perspectives around these sets of questions. They bring perspectives around research and system trends, around the future of learning, around AI-enabled instructional design, and around local and regional initiatives that support effective implementation. And so I'm going to ask each of them to help us connect some of the national learnings that they are seeing with some of the practical choices that each of you in this room are wrestling with today. And so instead of introducing each of them, I'm going to actually ask each of them to introduce themselves, the work that they're doing. And Bree, I'll start with you. Would love for you to introduce yourself, your organization, and then specifically, where do you see your organization and your work contributing important advancements around this conversation of the connection between AI and education?
Great. Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here. My name is Bree Dusseault. I am a principal and managing director at the Center on Reinventing Public Education, or CERPI. It's a research organization, and prior to that, I will add that I've been in the field. So I was a teacher, principal, school founder, worked at the cabinet level in both district and charter organizations in 3 different states. So what I'll talk about today is our research. So what CERPI does is we look at the system of education, and we try to understand around AI, how AI has the opportunity to catalyze or change long-standing systemic dynamics that most of us in the room have lived and worked through. We try to build more coherence across the field. So we do that by engaging in very actionable research that we hope is actually useful and doesn't sit on a shelf. We also convene field leaders, district leaders, educators, and we connect the thought leadership of those groups with the research. And through that, we hope to build more coherence across ideas and actual action on the ground. And then lastly, what I'll say for what we're thinking about for this next year. So we're launching our 3rd year and 4th year of different studies around AI and different convenings around AI. And the 2 pillars that we're looking at are evidence, and what does it mean to be trying to navigate this moment absent a lot of evidence, and how do decision makers, many of whom are in this room, make decisions, and how do you move, given that there's not a lot of evidence, but there's a lot of compelling reasons to be doing this work. And then we're also looking at what I would call vision to reality. So we've talked with a lot of early adopter school systems, some of whom, and leaders, some of whom are in this room nationally, and we hear a lot about the vision. We also know that implementation is challenging, so we're going to be looking more at how implementation takes hold this year.
Great. Babak.
Awesome. Morning, everybody. Good to see you all. My name is Babak Mostaghimi, and I'm from Learner Studio. My background is a bit of a mixed one. I was a teacher in Shelby, Mississippi, up in the Delta, just south of Memphis. Worked my way up to being an assistant superintendent in Gwinnett County Public Schools, which is a really large district, 180,000 kids just north of Atlanta. And led all our work starting in 2017 on AI readiness and what it looks like in the classroom. Back then, they thought we were crazy. Thankfully, we weren't. This would be a very different conversation had we been wrong. I'd be up here as the what would have happened if sort of scenario. But now I work at Learner Studio, where I'm a partner, and we are a field builder and an investor working on catalyzing the future of learning. And what that means broadly is that we believe that the purpose of learning is to inspire and prepare young people for life, career, and democracy. We think all those things are changing because of the age of AI. And we believe that our current model of schooling, our industrial model of schooling, is really helping to prepare kids for jobs that don't exist anymore and definitely won't by the time they get to mid-career. So the real question for us as Learner Studio is how do we re-architect our public education systems to meet the moment, this moment and every moment that's to come as technology emerges. So some of the areas that are really interesting to us right now are around this idea of pro-human AI. So the idea of, people often talk about AI as augmenting our skills or detracting from our skills, but rarely do they ask, could AI actually improve our skills, make us better human beings, increase our creativity, our collaboration, increase our abilities to cooperate and work with other people, while also improving our academic skills, and how to do that in really integrated ways. Another area we're looking at right now, which is really cool to be in this room because I know Tennessee has always led on this, is around assessment and measurement in the age of AI. What should we be measuring? What should we be assessing? How can we sort of get away from the stop, drop, and assess modes that we've been in and build more integrated ambient assessments that leverage AI to make it so that we can know exactly where kids are in a really rigorous way and support them without having to take a month out of the school year or sometimes more to get all those details. And then the final piece is that we see a lot of really great pieces of the future coming to life all across the country. And we want to help pull those together, unite those, and make it so that we're no longer doing sort of innovation by waiver, and instead actually strategically building the system of the future. So great to be here.
Awesome. Davis. Wonderful. Learning already. Thank you. Davis Zaunbrecher. I am the founding director of the New Orleans AI Education Fund. So we are a pool of local philanthropists that have listened to school systems, asked them what they need to meet this moment, and tried to raise and deploy philanthropy to help them through their challenges. The two main areas that we focus on, one picking up on Senator Frist's themes, leadership, the burden on school system leaders, small districts, charter schools, large districts, has been significant for a long time coming out of COVID, and then this very new and very consequential thing landed on their plate. And they have asked for help, they've asked for structured time, they've asked for frameworks to assess how they want AI to fit within their instructional systems and their broader organizational strategy. And we try to step in and provide those opportunities so that the different autonomous systems in New Orleans and in the New Orleans area can learn from each other and can bring the best to the classroom every day. At the tail end of those leadership cohorts that we run, we ask systems to identify a gap in their instructional program or a weak spot in their data, something that they are intending to focus on and prioritize in the year ahead. And then if there's a tool that's AI powered that meets the specific need, and they have a really robust implementation plan where they can say in advance how teachers are going to be trained, how instructional coaches are going to fold that into their work, how their data that they track will look, and then many other things that go into actually taking a really promising technology and making it shift behavior in the classroom and therefore shift student outcomes. If and when systems put forth a plan like that, then we have the opportunity to provide grant funding and then support them along that journey. And so that's what I'm super excited about for the 26-27 school year. We did that as a pilot project in 25-26 and got some really promising results from the KIPP New Orleans, the KIPP region in New Orleans, with a writing feedback tool. And now we have 6 systems in New Orleans who are embarking on different projects and all in a learning posture like everyone in this room and everyone on this panel is. So excited to be here.
Great. Andrea? Hi, good morning. My name's Andrea Pasinetti. I started a company called Kira. which is the AI operating system for education. I've spent a lot of time in Tennessee over the past several years. I believe a number of districts represented here are actually existing users of Kira, focused on computer science. So it's always great to be back and see so many old friends and to start making new ones as well. Kira is really a response to the fact that we believe education requires a dedicated approach to AI. Common use AI, sort of foundation model provided chatbots have significant limitations in terms of pedagogical structure and how they can support instruction as well as learning. And we built Kira with a view towards optimizing learning with AI. I've been working in this space my entire adult life. I started working on artificial intelligence as a tool for facilitating personalized learning before LLMs were a commercially available technology. So using more conventional tools like natural language processing, NLP, and machine learning, et cetera. And what's really exciting about the moment we are in today is the fact that personalized learning is actually within reach. The ability to support teachers to meet every student at the point they are at, supporting teachers with understanding students' strengths and where they need support vis-a-vis specific skills, et cetera, is very much within reach today. And that is the focus of Kira, and I'm excited to tell you more about it.
So one of the things I think we aspire to be true this morning is that we not only talk about these issues at a macro level, but that we also talk very specifically about use cases, examples that are both working to advance outcomes for students and maybe not working in advancing outcomes for students. And so I want to maybe in that spirit want to ask each of you to reflect, and Babak, maybe I'll start with you and then go to Davis after that. You're seeing this work across the country. Give us an example of a specific opportunity or a use case that is giving you the most hope about what's possible in this space? And what are you most concerned about? You don't necessarily have to give a specific example if you don't want to, but what are you most concerned about as well?
Sure, I'm going to do this the opposite way that I know you're supposed to. I'm going to start with the bad one first. So the bad one is I think there's a lot of evidence that the sort of like relationship-based chatbots are a really bad thing right now for young users in particular. And I know people are like, what does that have to do with education? It has everything to do with education because our kids are interacting with these things. And if we're not helping them to navigate those realities, then we've like lost the entire game. We've actually had in America our first suicides as a result of like these chatbot relationships and those sorts of things. And it's only going to get increasingly more complicated. And that's like a very rare place where for me, I'm like, there's just a line right now because we haven't figured out the technology and the impacts and the social structures around it well enough. And again, is a really good example of why we can't bury our heads in the sand on AI in the school day and across the school day, whether you're a guidance counselor or a PE teacher or whoever you are, AI is already impacting our kids. And so the question is, are we going to engage with them and help them to navigate that world? On the positive side, though, and I'm a really, really big fan of the positive uses of AI, I think the biggest trend that I'm seeing that I love is AI that's getting away from screen-based technologies and getting people to like look up and at one another. And I think we're already sort of at peak or nearing peak sort of screen-based LLM, I'm typing to chat bot AI, and we're really getting to places that go far beyond that. So two very specific examples. Number one, there's a organization called OKO Labs, Labs, that's invented or built this small group math instruction tool for K-5. The really, really interesting thing right now is that typically an AI tool would be like, hey, let me get eyeballs on screen, i.e. addiction, dopamine rush, all that sort of stuff. Instead, what this is doing is it's creating small group collaborative environments in person where just like a teacher would pull a small group and work with 4 kids together, it's getting and prompting kids to like look up and at each other. Hey, this person got this part right. Can you talk to them about how to do it and those sorts of things? And the neat part is in the background, it's not only measuring their improvement in math, but it's also measuring their improvement in collaboration, which we know is a big workforce skill that's super important, right? Another example really quickly is completely not screen-based. That one still has a screen for now, but I think that technology is going to change over time. Is an organization called Inkwire, INKWIRE.co. So leave the M off. And I always say that because I personally search them all the time. But essentially, project-based learning is something that we know is really, really great. But oftentimes it becomes more about the projects and less about the learning. But what this tool does is it makes it so that you can actually incorporate directly the standards that you care about, the sort of portrait of a graduate or whatever competencies that you have as a school. It allows a teacher or a learner to input what they're interested in examining, and then builds out a project that they can do that's like really sort of like engaging. A quick example, I was on a panel with a 7th grader. There's nothing worse than being on a panel with a 7th grader because they will always outshine you no matter what you say or do. And this 7th grader was talking about how for her family, food insecurity was an issue. And she wanted to explore this topic of food insecurity. Had she been in a typical classroom, even my own as a 5th grader, I would have said, that's great. Let's get back to work. Like we got work to do. We got like workbooks and all that sort of stuff. Instead, her teacher said, hey, let's use Inkwire. Let's have you build out your project. Inkwire is going to embed in there the decimals you need to learn, the fractions you need to learn, the reading and writing you need to learn. And all of a sudden, this young person was out in her community learning about food insecurity, learning about the fractions, all that sort of stuff. So anyways, I think AI that gets us involved with our communities is where the future is headed.
I'm thinking your point about sort of getting us to look up, right, is reminded me also of the example Senator Frist gave of what's the experience of a physician with a patient.
Absolutely.
And looking up and actually spending time with that patient versus typing the whole time too. Davis, you can choose to either start with the thing that's concerning you, the example that's concerning you, or okay, yeah, great.
And I would have said companionship. Focused AI. I'm a dad of 3. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and I don't quite talk to the 2-year-old about AI yet, but the 7 and 5-year-old for sure, underscoring that this is not a human, et cetera, et cetera. On a much less serious note, I would say a thing that concerns me that I see is school systems that have not yet invested a top leader's time and capacity on AI. And either thinking head in the sand or thinking a junior whippersnapper can pull everything together that's needed for the system to respond to AI. And I really think that this is a C-suite, executive team, cabinet level issue that needs to be talked about and resourced and put on goals and put on scorecards and ripple through the organization, and would encourage systems in there to think about that and figure out how to make that happen. The promising thing that I see, there's a ton of great tools in the humanities and writing and ELA zone that we are seeing significant uptake on in Louisiana broadly and in New Orleans specifically. Dacia's here from Course Mojo. She'll tell you all about that. We have 16 schools in New Orleans who have demoed the product and have dove in fully because they believe that the integration between high quality instructional materials and very targeted, very focused AI is going to yield results. And I think anytime you can have a tool that meets a specific need, you're going to get good outcomes as long as the human element and the apparatus around it is supportive and understands what you're driving towards.
Great. All right. Andrea, I'll go to you maybe next. What use case are you seeing that you're most excited about, and what's an example of something you're concerned about?
I'll start with a concern as well in keeping with the theme. I actually have 2 larger concerns. One is, I think there's an absence of, or a dearth at very least, of thoughtful and well-constructed policies around how to adopt AI and what AI can actually do to advance the goals of a district. That's not to say there's a dearth of policies, period. There's a lot of policy kind of language on paper, but I think it doesn't really consider fundamentally where AI can be impactful and where it can be less impactful and as a result dangerous. And by that I mean, we spend a lot of time talking about generative AI and the ability to create materials, lesson plans, lessons in general, so output-based AI tools and products. But I think the really powerful and net new opportunity that isn't commoditized that AI brings to districts and learning organizations more broadly is inferential. By which I mean AI today gives us the opportunity to measure with a lot more accuracy and specificity and answer the difficult questions districts historically have not been able to answer about where students are on their learning journeys, where they're struggling, where they need intervention. It allows us to make judgments that are precise and scientific and understandable. They're actually rationally penetrable about where students need intervention. And being able to take tier 1 instruction and marry it to tier 2 and tier 3 instruction in a way that doesn't require huge amounts of staff time and many millions of dollars is now something we can do with AI. And I find AI policies, AI guidance tends to under-index on that and over-index on creating lesson plans. So that's something that gives me concern, and I think it's something that structurally requires better procurement processes and more conversations like this one. The second piece that gives me pause, which is additional fuel on that fire, is that this is a very underinvested industry. There are a lot of parallels between education and healthcare, both in terms of the stakes, as well as in terms of how AI in general can support outcomes. And we heard a little bit about that this morning in a very poignant example. I think the big difference is that the amount of money that goes into building powerful, effective, and clinically proven AI in healthcare is disproportionate to the amount of money that goes into building similar tools in education, which means the cycle of buying point solutions, which has been the cycle that has gotten districts into pretty hairy terrain with respect to the number of SaaS tools that they pay for and use, the distribution of data, how that data is managed, how to gather insights from that data. That same cycle is at risk of being perpetuated in education because fundamentally the approach we're taking to commercializing the technology is not so different from the approach that was taken 5, 6, 10 years ago with the first wave of education technology. So those two things give me a lot of pause. I think what is encouraging and where I see a lot of opportunity is districts, well, I think is also born out of a not ideal circumstance, which is a lot of districts are in crisis, a lot of districts are struggling, and a lot of districts are, as a result, revisiting assumptions that had been deeply entrenched for a long time. Districts are willing to have conversations about rethinking their technology stacks, about rethinking how they deploy technology in classrooms. And oftentimes that's motivated not just by cost savings, but also by a desire to achieve both cost savings and better outcomes. So I think in this moment of challenge for this industry, there is a big opportunity and there is openness to conversations that historically have been harder to even initiate and required more activation energy to start. I will say, when I first started coming to Tennessee 2.5 years ago, talking about AI in education was verboten. Like, it was not encouraged, in fact, the opposite. And the fact that we're all here today at a conference and a series of conversations which are proudly about AI in education, I think is a great start. But there's definitely a lot of work to be done.
Bree, I want to go to you next. So we've heard examples, we've talked about leadership, we've talked about sort of strategic decision-making around AI. Obviously, SERPI is spending a lot of time researching the practices that districts, charter schools are taking around implementation, around strategy. I think one thing that we're thinking a lot about at SCORE is the difference between strategic uses of these tools in a ways that further goals that a district has, as opposed to sort of piecemeal, fragmented adoption of different tools. And so I would love for you to talk about sort of what you're learning, what SERPI is learning in this space. What practices are you seeing that you're hopeful about, and what guidance are you beginning to sort of elevate for leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think starting with a bright spot, which we'll touch on some of these, something that we're seeing that's really, I think, hopeful is a culture of entrepreneurial hope and exploration, and dare I say, play. For adults, for the system leaders. I think all of us in this room have had to go, I'll call it play, play with the technology that we didn't come up with. And we're trying to figure out how to use that in ways to solve, as Andrea said, pretty long-standing and tractable problems. From a systems perspective, where I think you see a lot of hope are in certain. We've been talking to early adopter school districts who have adopted this in a strategic way. And one example, there are many examples, honestly, in Tennessee, and we're actually putting out a brief about, in the next week or two, about some of the lessons learned from you all in the room, Tennessee SCORE's role, the role of the State Board of Education and other players, because that gets at, from a systems level, what it's going to take. I think the idea of asking a district or a school leader within a district or within a charter network or a standalone school to figure out how to do all of this and then lead system level change is unrealistic, of course. It's impossible. And so what we're going to need to see is are ways that players work together under a broader vision, ideally at the state level, and then within each district and school, other visions that plug into that. So concretely, one example, and I could have chosen one from Tennessee, but just to give some outside of this realm, is a district in Arizona called Agua Fria Union High School District. 10,000 students, majority students BIPOC, on the free reduced lunch program, less than $10,000 a year per pupil revenue. And they have a vision of career-connected learning, and they have an innovative solutions department. They have stipended AI specialists at every school. And they are creating bespoke tools that are designed to solve specific problems in a very playful way, but also a way that is connected to a vision, grounded in their teachers' professional learning, which is a really big, important part, building AI literacy, and is anchored to some community-specific challenges that have to do with career connectedness and actually a new model of governance where all of their students are in career-connected pathways. So I think that's an example of a system, like Andrea was saying, that's kind of, they're on the edge. They have a lot that they want to do. They also are supported by a nonprofit organization, the National Institute for Education and the Economy. They have several universities, Northern Arizona University and Arizona State University, which have created guidance and training and hold communities of practice. So they're not isolated. Again, you can probably, a lot of this is happening in Tennessee. But that's a very concrete example. I think that what that represents, what we're learning, is leadership, as Senator Frist said, leadership is critical. Vision is critical. Change management is critical because there's also a lot of skepticism and there's a lot of not understanding what this is. And a school that's employing AI doesn't necessarily have any change to screen time. It may have a lot of stuff happening invisibly in the back end or outside of the school day. So there's a lot of work that we need to do to understand what we mean by an AI-enabled or an AI-supported school. That involves communication strategy, bringing parents to the table to not just engage, but to honestly be involved in and help kind of co-construct some of these needs, and to also be supported in learning what it is that they're signing up for by having their children attend a system that might be taking this on or a school that might be taking this on. So that's all kind of typical change management stuff, but it seems to be really, really important at a fast clip right now because we also can't get out from under the fact that the technology is so pervasive. The thing I'll say that is I'll name it as a concern. I think it's also a charge. I think it's a charge for those of us who actually are early adopters, which I think by nature sitting in this room, we're probably early adopters, whether we want to be or not. And I think the charge I would give is how do you make, and I mentioned this in my last comment, but using Agua Fria as an example, what they don't have yet is the capacity to know whether the strategies that they're leading actually translate in student improvement and growth and well-being. They have some ideas, they are collecting informal evidence, but it's really challenging to ask a district and to expect a district to quickly start accumulating that evidence and to run a data strategy. That's a whole other separate conversation. I also study that. It's a phenomenon. Those of us who have worked, many of us have in the system, know how hard it is to do comprehensive, thoughtful data strategy. So that is kind of coming up against where many systems are at who are trying to pilot these ideas. And so I think the charge I would give is, what does it mean? What kind of data can we collect? How can we help bring teachers, school leaders, system leaders together in a conversation around informal and formal data? And I would assume that I think the way that we collect evidence is going to have to shift and adjust because of the moment we're in. And actually the technology can help us do that in really cool new ways. But absent that, my concern, and I think Davis, you touched on this too, my concern is that we actually will lose the momentum and the opportunity to actually inform and bring about systemic change instead of fragmented ad hoc change.
Yeah. So Davis, Bree talked about what she's learning at the system level. You're investing in supporting schools, school leaders. I'm curious about what are you learning from school leaders? What are they saying that they need in making these decisions? And also, you know, we have folks who in this room who are thinking about this work from a philanthropic perspective too, and so would be curious about what role philanthropy can play in helping to test and learn at the school level too.
Yeah, for sure. You probably have heard the phrase that no framework is perfect, some frameworks are useful. So the framework that we have found useful is something called the AI Innovation Index, which is totally free for any system to sign up and use. It provides 21 different indicators that system leaders can self-assess on. And then there's a companion survey for students, a companion survey for families, and a companion survey for educators, all of which stitch together and paint a picture of how a system is evolving and meeting the moment across a bunch of different dimensions. Everything from, have you set forth a vision and connected this to your values, and the more adaptive leadership pieces, to very core meat and potatoes things like, do you have an enterprise platform chosen for your district? Have you integrated AI into certain instructional programs, and so on and so forth? And so having our systems complete that on a steady clip, so every semester for multiple years, has been and will be super, super important, because they can see their data against systems nationwide. They can see their trajectory over time. They can pair the areas where they're weakest to specific working groups or task forces that they run and move along that rubric so that there's a sense of, if not perfect order, at least some pathway forward to make progress amidst this very swirling and confusing and complicated time. The things, I mean, transparently, the things that we've learned is that the progress on that pathway is going to take years. This is not a 26-27 school year. We're going to be sitting in here in August 2027, and everyone's going to feel great and they've got it figured out. Even if the technology stopped developing, which to your point, it's not going to stop developing, we would still take 5 years, 10 years for the capabilities to actually be absorbed into school systems. Getting started on a process and a regular routine of thinking about your status and thinking about where you want to grow next has been really important. And then all of that is change management and is leadership. You have to lead amidst a lot of uncertainty, and you need to say, we don't know exactly where we're going to end up, but this is the next best step that we're going to take.
I want to turn, each of us have talked a little bit about this, and I know that this is a question that is on the mind of everybody in this room, but Babak, would love for you to talk a little bit more, and you brought this up earlier. I think is working or not working. We see lots of examples of new data around, is it actually supporting learning? Is it undermining learning? And so I'm curious, what guardrails matter most? What cautions should we be aware of? And again, I'm thinking about this both from a question of safety and privacy and also a question of actual learning.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. What I love about this question is that it pairs the conversation around privacy and safety with the learning question. Oftentimes we try and have those conversations separately, and that gets us into really weird places, right? And like one weird place is where we're like, oh, we're gonna keep everyone safe by just banning everything, right? Like, yes, the foolproof way of like making sure no kid ever gets ran over by a car is by banning them from crossing the street. Like, we could do that theoretically, but it has so many other disastrous consequences, right? On the other extreme is where people are like, oh, we should just like AI everything, or ed tech everything, or screen everything. And then you get into these situations where you're like, the kid can't have a conversation with somebody else. Like, they can't look you in the eye and give you a firm handshake, and you're like, what just happened, right? And so we call these two extremes, the one that's like nostalgic and like thinking about the past, like this nostalgic humanism, this idea of those great times before we had any technology, right? And then we talk about the other side is like techno-nihilism of like, oh, anything that technology should do, we should make it do. And instead what we think is the reasonable and rational future is somewhere in between that we call the human flourishing middle way, right? And in that human flourishing middle way, we recognize that technology, when used correctly, can do great things for humanity. And that our goal should be to build the right guardrails and the right entry points for technology to be used in that middle space, right? So what that means is when you're looking at school district policy or state policy, things that balance the two are really important. I'll give you an example. A person came to me recently asking for advice around some new state policies, and he was like, yeah, we're gonna make sure that we're looking at the efficacy of AI tools on like literacy. I'm like, okay, that's great, first order impact. What about the second order impact? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, okay, imagine I came to you with a tool that creates 100% literacy in the kid who used it, but it also creates 100% addiction in the technology. Is that a proper tool to use? It's like, oh, I didn't even think about that, right? So these are the types of things that we haven't actually thought about, even with existing ed tech. Like, we pretend like this is all new, right? But even the sitting ed tech platforms, the things that we have in our classrooms, we have these same questions that we need to be wrestling with. And then my last urge would be to make sure that you're talking to people on the ground. Like, when we were in Gwinnett building our AI framework, we built it with 160 teachers. We built it with parents at the table. We built it with pastors at the table, literally everybody. And that's how we got to a place where people weren't bucking and moaning and complaining, and instead we could land on a place that worked for everybody.
So you brought up policy levers. Andrea's brought up policy levers. Bree, I want to ask you about policy. We have policymakers in the room who are and will be making decisions that will impact the success of these tools, the safety of these tools, the extent to which they accelerate the things that we actually care about. And I'm thinking not just around teaching and learning, but also how are we preparing students for the workforce and what skills they need to be building. And so, Bree, what advice would you have in the policy space around what should be top of mind for policymakers? And again, I think I'd be interested in your thoughts on sort of guardrails, certainly, but also what role should policymakers and states be playing to actually incentivize the right kinds of use cases that we want to explore?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'll name that, and I think this is hard I think when you're in policy, you want things to follow, you don't want to have a lot of ambiguity at times. I would actually start with saying that I think that policy making needs to also reflect the moment that we're in, by being, and this is kind of can be an oxymoron, by being both clear and flexible, and acknowledging that the policy that we set may need to be updated, adjusted, bringing in multiple perspectives on a more frequent schedule than a typical traditional policy would be. So I think the first push is, if you're a policymaker, how too can you be entrepreneurial, playful, or just to connect to my last conversation, and to move a little differently, while owning the responsibilities you have to also be a guardrail and a safety keeping function. while also acknowledging that we have to be figuring out how to make this moment work for us and not have children not crossing the street, metaphorically. So what does that look like? And I think there's a role of the state in this for sure. I think that within, there's some just clear data, privacy, security, safety requirements that have to be in place. And those involve protecting student data, ownership of data. There are some really interesting conversations around like sovereignty of data. What does it look like long-term for a child to own their data? That are some long-term questions that policy could start to be protecting. And a lot of that is actually about helping districts ensure that contracts with vendors are appropriately organized. And if we can talk out, there are some examples of states that are starting to explore accountability structures on vendors that protect data privacy. I think that there's a lot of talk right now about screen time. I think that there is a way to be responsive and to bring parents to the table to understand what the big concerns are. There's some real concerns around screen time, and to also work to kind of demystify or disconnect screen time from AI, which is, screen time has been a function for a long time. We've had computer screens for a long time. But there absolutely needs to be work done to help understand the kind of where these concerns are coming from and to put really safe and appropriate constraints on with flexibility, because there are also children who actually have learning disabilities or very specific needs that require screens. We've been hearing from parent advocates in the special education community about concerns about that. So there, again, it's kind of clear but flexible. In terms of the role of the state that can help support this, I would be thinking about how do you create solutions that incentivize change on, I would say, two horizons. And this borrows from some of the horizons work that Babak's group Learner Studio does, and it mirrors things that we've heard from field leaders, which is, first is this horizon. So you really need policies for right now. I think outcomes-based contracts are a great example of a state-led policy that helps create and collect evidence on both the vendor and the district side, and that is where districts and vendors create mutually agreeable contracts to collect evidence of what's working. And to also ensure that you're implementing, on the district side, that you're implementing the tool with dosages that align to what we know works. And so it's kind of a win-win. They're harder to set up than usual, and I would really say if you're a funder in the space, helping incentivize and seed funding support for those partnerships to be established is a really, really, I think, high leverage role. On the broader horizon, which is the future, we need to also be thinking about the future our students are moving into, and today, knowing that we need 5 to 10 years. As David said, we are not ready to start rolling out new school models leveraging AI with certainty. We are in R&D right now. And so I think there are some really neat ways to incentivize like what we call sandboxes or playful spaces for leaders, teachers, to fail fast, to try things out, to start piloting in secure ways that have flexibility and that are by leaders who have a trusted track record, who can actually do this. So we've got to marry this clear set of supports with incentivized funds. I would also say maybe funding some challenges or solutions to challenges that are intractable and longstanding, specific to the state and specific to some of the student needs that are already a part of your priorities. So that kind of 2 horizon timeframe matters a lot, and really getting lots of stakeholders, I've mentioned parents, vendors, and system leaders to the table.
Great. Okay, we are coming to a close for our opening panel. I want to end with a final question. I'll start, Andrea, with you, and then we'll come down the road this way and end with Bree. So this is like a complete the sentence question, okay? So 1 year from now, Tennessee will be further ahead on AI and education if leaders spend more time on X and less time on Y.
More time on simplifying. And we started today's session with a comment on leadership. And I think fundamentally, the role of a leader is to take complicated problems and simplify them. So I think finding the heuristics that allow us to simplify. And less time being concerned. I think we spend a lot of energy and reps on concern, and they don't really.
Davis.
If the large majority of districts in Tennessee have a named AI leader who is dedicating 30 to 50% of their time and is in conversation with their peers across the state, that would move the state forward very significantly. And then it's so hard to let things go in education, and that's going to be a very local and specific decision. But someone recently said that we have to let go of our precious things that we've had in our school systems, and so there might be a moment where we have to release something that has previously been precious because the world has changed around us.
Great.
I think for me, we're seeing major shifts in parent demand for things that we've always known are needed. Parents want their kids to be safe, healthy, successful in life, i.e. ready for life and career and democracy. I think we'll be better off when we center that as our goal. Yeah. And make our schools about learning and less about schooling. And so we spend a lot of our time on the schooling side of things. How do we improve school? And sometimes in ways that don't improve learning for the future.
Great. All right, Bree, close us out.
More time collecting evidence or just information on what is working and what's not working, and using that as part of a thoughtful communication strategy for change management to build momentum, and less time falling into polarizing or binary conversations, because that's just not actually what the space is in we're at.
Amazing. So I'm inspired by this conversation. Thank you for the work that each of you is doing. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and perspective with Tennesseans today. Really grateful. And I'd like to ask you all to join me in thanking our panelists this morning.